ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. It's Sarah here. Welcome back to Never Out of Books. Today I'm going to wrap up January for y'all. I read, I believe, 11 books. 10 of them were from the library, and one is one that I owned. To start off with, I finished an audiobook, and it was a nonfiction called For All the Tea in China, How England Stole the World's Favorite Drink and Changed History by Sarah Rose. It was also narrated by the author. This is what the audiobook looks like anyway. This is about Robert Fortune, who was sent, I believe, by the East India Company to China to steal Chinese tea plants for various political reasons. This is actually the first recorded instance of corporate espionage. So the story and the information were incredibly interesting. How they sent tea plants back, how he managed to trick his way into the inside of China. It was all very interesting, but I felt like it could have been even better. It was a little bit dull and textbooky as opposed to like a grand story. And that was unfortunate because I was really looking forward to this book, and it just ended up not being quite what I wanted. I'm also not really sure that the author was a very good narrator. Maybe that was part of the problem. For something that could have been wildly interesting, it wasn't entirely spectacular. It was a 3-star read for me. I was really hoping it was going to be better than that because I love tea above all things, and his stealing these tea plants changed the world as we know it. I'd like to try to find another book about this subject and this man. So if you know any other tea books, please link them below for me. For my classics challenge, I read 2 books this month. Yay! One was The 21 Balloons. This is a Newbery Award-winning middle grade book. It is about a teacher who retires, and he decides that he is going to float around the world for a year in his hot air balloon because he doesn't really want to see anyone ever again. Because he is so burnt out and tired of all of this. But they end up finding him in the wrong ocean because it was really the Pacific Ocean he wanted to fly over. They found him in the Atlantic Ocean not very long after he set off. And he won't tell anyone but the Balloon Traveling Society that he's part of in San Francisco of the story of what happened. So they take him back to San Francisco, and then he tells his story. This was a really cute book, and I can see why it's a classic children's literature book that, I don't know if they still read it in school, but I think it was one of the options when I was in school, because it mixes an adventure, like boys and girls would like it equally, and then it mixes with historical fact as well as a lot of information about balloons as well, so you can see where it would be a very teachable book for children. He ends up landing on the island of Krakatoa, leading up to the largest volcanic eruption ever recorded. So that little history weaved in with this fantastical story was very good. Of course, I'm not the intended audience, and my thoughts on classics, I have a very difficult time with them, so I did just give it 3 stars, but I can see its value for reading purposes. It just wasn't very exciting for me. I also read the only book that I actually own that I read, The Hound of the Baskervilles by Arthur Conan Doyle. I have this edition. I read A Study in Scarlet last year. It was pretty good. This also is a really good mystery. It's about this lineage of men who are killed by this mysterious hound that no one has ever seen before. And with Sherlock Holmes, the supernatural does not come into play. There is a logical explanation for everything. And so this is the investigation into what is happening, and they want to protect the current owner of this title's life. This book is mostly Dr. Watson, who is there with Sir Charles Baskerville, and there's not really a whole lot of Sherlock Holmes, kind of like in the first couple chapters and the last couple chapters. I don't know how all of the Sherlock Holmes stories go because I've only read A Study in Scarlet and this. I have not read any of the short stories, but I was a little bit surprised by that. It was an excellent mystery, but I will say I don't think that I'm going to become a Sherlock Holmes fan. I do not feel the need to read all of the short stories. I am not going to be a buff of this. I feel very content with the amount of Sherlock I have consumed in my life. I do believe I gave it 4 stars. It was a good mystery, but again, there was nothing that like pulled me in to feeling anything. I read 2 young adult contemporary romance books. They were both in the same series. The first one is one of the ones that I'd had sitting on my 2013 added as interested list. So it was on my list of books that I wanted to read this year just to get them off, get them done. And it's Sloppy Firsts by Megan McCafferty, and the second one is called Second Helpings. This follows Jessica Darling. They never particularly say it in the books, but I think she suffers from some form of just low-level depression. And she is very angsty teenager in high school around the 2000 time frame. So I resonated with the time period and could definitely identify with Jessica Darling. Definitely. And we start off in this first book with Jessica writing letters to her best friend Hope, who has moved away. They both had some tragedy in their life. Hope's older brother had overdosed, and they moved away because of that. The family did not want they did not want Hope to be raised in the same town where there's the drugs and things of that nature. So they moved away. And Jessica really had never bonded with anyone else in her life, and feels a bit like an outcast herself because her older sister is like perfect and quite a bit older, and her brother died as an infant, so she never knew them, and so she always felt like an afterthought to her family, like a replacement. She is also on track. She's a good runner. Her father is really pushes her to be fantastic in track, even though I don't think she really likes it very much. She's only hanging out with this clique of mean girls for some reason. But it was it was a really good book. I really, really enjoyed it, and I think really because I felt the time period because I lived it. Some of the angst comes up from her attraction to this boy Marcus, who is kind of a lowlife and who was in the group that her best friend Hope's brother was in with the druggies. And she just somehow gets an attraction to him, and he's not in the book a lot, which is very interesting considering she's angsting over this quite a lot. And he's not a lot in the second book either, but you just know that they're very good for each other. And it was a very good little romance, both books. There are 2 more books in the series that take place, one in college and one of them after college. I don't think I'm going to read them. I was completely spoiled for them by reading reviews, so I don't think I'm not gonna go there. But I really enjoyed these 2. I read several romantic suspense books this month. The first one I read was To Get It Off of My TBR, which is kind of the theme of this month, was getting a good start on getting these books read, especially since I did not have my books at that time. It's Ice by Linda Howard. She is a well-known romantic suspense author. This book takes place over 12 hours, I want to say. It's very short. And this takes place in Maine, and it is about an ice storm that comes. Strangely enough. So our male protagonist is on leave from the military. His father is the police chief, I want to say. And so he is tasked with checking up on a girl he knew who just happens to be visiting so that she can sell her family's house up in the mountains. But there's an ice storm coming, and she'll be stuck up on the mountain if she doesn't come down. She has some crazy stuff happen to her where these 2 people end up wanting to either ransom her or kill her or whatever the story was. I can't even remember at this point. And is stuck up there. She's trying to get off the mountain because she knows there's an ice storm coming. But basically it's them trying to get off the mountain without getting killed from these 2 people. This was action from start to finish. There wasn't a whole lot of backstory craziness going on. It started, they were immediately in the middle of problems. It was good. It suited the purpose. I gave it 3 stars. It was fine. Also, for the challenge to get these books off of my list, I read Hell on Wheels by Julie Ann Walker. This is the first book in the Black Knights series. It is a very long series. This one follows Nate, who is in love with his best friend's younger sister, the best friend that was killed in Afghanistan under severe torture, to be perfectly honest. His deceased comrade in arms sent his little sister something that the political people do not want her to have, and she has no idea she has it. So they start trailing her, and she runs to him, who is part of this motorcycle club that's really not a motorcycle club, for protection, and they have to solve what's going on, and people are shooting at her, and there's all kinds of shenanigans going on. I know I put this on my shelf because, you know, there's crazy masculine men packing heat. I'm a sucker for that crap, okay? One of my pet peeves in romantic suspense books are when people are shooting at you and all you can think of is whether someone is hot or not. Like, you know, that's a little bit too much for me. This one wasn't too bad with that, but it was a little bit. So I ended up giving it 3 stars. But because this first book ended kind of on a cliffhanger, I decided to read the second book because I really wanted their love story. In Right Trouble. This is about the boss man, basically, and his mechanic. The girl is a kick-butt mechanic, and it's awesome. He likes her, but he thinks he's too old for her because there's about a 13-year age difference. Well, she is about had it and decides to go on a vacation. She's like, listen, I haven't taken a vacation in my life. I'm going on vacation. She's on a boat with her rich best friend, and they get abducted by freaking pirates, okay? So I had to read this book because there was like pirate activity and it was on the ocean. It was like a total different sort of book than the first book. Fortunate enough, boss man is an ex-Navy SEAL, so they stage like a crazy rescue, and yet these people are still after them because of vendettas and all kinds of stuff. It was crazy. It was a lot of fun. Again, lots more men packing heat. But at least this time, there wasn't so much of a cliffhanger, so it leaves a little bit more up to me as to whether or not I want to continue with this series or not, because it is a 3-star series. It's a lot of fun, but I wouldn't say it's like the best of the genre. I read 2 historical romances. The first one was a newer release that just happened to come from the library, so I read it. The Girl with the Make-Believe Husband by Julia Quinn. I love Julia Quinn's books. And I really, really enjoyed this book. If you've seen the movie While You Were Sleeping, it has similar vibes to that, even though it is a historical romance. Cecilia has 2 options: to move in with her aunt or to marry her disgusting cousin who just wants her for her money. So she goes off because her brother is missing, and she just doesn't believe he's dead and wants to find him and take care of him in America. So she goes over there and doesn't find him, but finds his best friend, who she'd never met before, but had been kind of communicating with via letter through her brother's letters anyway. And kind of, even though they'd never met, had like feelings for him. And he has amnesia, sucker for that stuff, is comatose and all of that, and she pretends to be his wife so that she can take care of him. And it was adorable, and Julia Quinn just writes such fun books. I love them. The banter is fantastic, and they make me smile, so I give it 4 stars. The other historical romance I read was A Lady by Midnight by Tessa Dare. This one is the 3rd book in the Spindle Cove series. I read the first 2 books many, many years ago, and this had been sitting on my TBR for reasons unknown. So we have Kate. She has a very big birthmark on her face. She doesn't know who her family is. She remembers nothing from her childhood very much. She was raised like in an orphanage sort of school, and she's teaching music lessons. And we also have Thorn, who is a colonel in the newly formed militia there, and it is their love story. I thoroughly enjoyed this. Thorn remembered her from her past. He was actually part of her past, and didn't think that he was good enough for her. It was a very nice book. I enjoyed it. Again, there was some witty banter. She was definitely a spunky woman, and I enjoyed it. Another one off of my shelf that needed to be read is Head Over Heels by Jill Mansell. And this is another book that has many characters. I had to write them all down because I couldn't remember who was who, and all the twists and turns that go on in their lives and in their friendships. You know, all the people all fall in love, and it's like such a happy book. The main love story is about the family that moves into the big house, who happen to be an actor and actress, and they're like the sweethearts of the tabloids. And the woman who knew the man beforehand and has a hidden son with him that he doesn't know about. The banter was great. I love the book set in England. You know, the writing was fantastic. It was a great palate cleanser. And I just love her books. And I think I'm going to read another one this month in February, too. And last, but definitely not least, I read Tall Tales and Wedding Veils by Jane Graves. Another one that just happened to be sitting on my TBR for a very, very, very long time. Many, many years. And this is a oops, we married in Vegas and don't know what to do about it story. It was just the right time to read this, so I can see why I put it on my TBR. Also really appreciated that she was a chunkier woman, but they did not make a big deal about it. The whole book wasn't about that. It was just mentioned a few times that she's a size 12 or 14 or something like that. So it was really a non-entity in the book, but it was there, and it was nice to read about a heroine who is more average sized. So that is it for January. I am happy with my reading. I think I read a lot of the books I had on my TBR at the beginning of the month. Although I didn't finish East of Eden, I barely even read any of it, but that's okay. It was, it was definitely a productive month. And I will talk to you all again later. Bye.